Okay. So, this is my Steven Sausage Roll TAS. Steven Sausage Roll. Steven the Sausage Roll. This is Steven, Mr. Orange and Red here, and these are his sausages. And we are going to cook all of them. It's going to take a while. The start of the game here is pretty fast. There's a whole bunch of levels. Each one of these sort of transparent forks is a level. And they're all really quick, because these are sort of teaching you how to play the game. Now, there isn't, strictly speaking, an order for these levels. Definitely the ones right around the starting point are a bit easier. You'll see they all have like 2 sausages and a very large number of grills. Some of the later levels are a lot harder in that regard. They'll have fewer grills, or the grills will be farther apart, or they'll have more sausages, or they'll have fewer sausages. In fact, sometimes that's harder. The main trick here, so this is a tool-assisted run. For those who aren't aware of what that means that I'm not playing this game. First of all, this is a recording. Second of all, this recording was made using a cheat program. That program lets me record inputs, play them back, get them perfect. They'll be inputted on the first frame possible, so there's no mistakes where it takes a little bit longer to push a button. There's no undoing, there's no resetting of levels, right? It's going to be playing perfectly. So obviously there's a bunch of time that I'm saving here solely based on input speed. This playback is not going to make mistakes, and it's going to save a lot of time. But there also have been a couple of improvements, not in this world, but in some of the later worlds on the actual solutions, and I'll be calling those out when they happen. None of them have happened yet, don't worry. So, I did want to talk a little bit about the movement in this game, which is one of the things that makes it interesting. In this game, your movement keys, you have the same standard 4 movement keys, up, down, left, and right, and they don't move Steven, strictly speaking, forwards, up, down, left, or right. They actually will first rotate him, and then move him, which means you can't sort of strafe. Like, you'll see this as Steven's moving. I'm always going to turn either in the direction that I'm moving or backwards, away from it. I can't sidestep at all. And that's an intentional thing on part of the game. It's actually one of the things that makes these puzzles so tricky. And as a result, there's a lot of very careful movement that I'm going to do with Steven. I did want to call out here, a mechanic that is not strictly required for this level, but is required later, is stepping onto the grills there. I call it a burned step, but regardless, it takes a little bit less time than 2 steps, but longer than 1 step. So, whenever possible, you do want to take a burned step, but it's not strictly required. This level was changed slightly. I flipped the solution top to bottom, and that means that you end in the right spot. This level is very fast. So, about Steven's movement. Because Steven cannot side strafe, it always takes 2 movements to rotate and then to step if you're going to send him in a direction. Oh, there was a slight improvement here for handling that right sausage, moving it back to the right before you push the 3rd sausage in. So the gist here is that I'm going to be trying wherever possible to not move Steven around as much, because rotating him takes time. All of the movements take the same amount of time, moving in the same direction or rotating, they all take the same amount of time. But that does mean that moving Steven far diagonals in particular is very expensive, because you have to turn him and turn him back. This level had an improvement from Dark Note 0. Right here, we can cook this sausage, the sausage that's now in front of us, a little bit better, and it saves us 1 additional trip. 20 moves or so. Anyway, so for the most part, I'm going to be trying to manipulate sausages with my fork, because the fork has a lot more range than Steven, right? If you think about Steven's position, it's only one tile, but the fork can cover sort of the 3x3 square around him. It includes the corners. The fork does interact with sausages in the corners. You'll see that from time to time. This is a new mechanic. So there weren't any trees in the previous world, in World 1. And now that there are trees and other physical obstacles, we can spear a sausage. So that means that we sort of walk directly into it, and our fork gets stuck, which has two effects. One, we can't turn anymore. Two, we can side strafe, which we couldn't do before. What happens when you try and turn as you side strafe? And three, and this will be relevant later, the sausage doesn't roll. So it's not super obvious if you're not paying a lot of attention to it, but each sausage does have two sides, and every time you push it, it rotates. And when you spear the sausage, it doesn't. It's not relevant in all of the levels, but a couple of the levels in this world are going to take pretty huge advantage of that. Like, as far as a puzzle mechanic goes. Other than that, that's actually our only new mechanic in this world, which is great. They've been introducing the mechanics pretty slowly, and World 1 taught us a whole bunch of things. Here's a great level that teaches this mechanic. There's only one grill here, and so in order to spear all the sausages, or both the sausages, we have to spear them. Sorry, in order to cook both the sausages, we have to spear them, so that they can shift their parity. This level is infamous for being terrible, and I don't quite agree, but it is hard. I did want to call out here that there was an improvement I found, which surprised me, because I thought this level was pretty optimized. That's fine. It'll be in the VOD. When you need to fork push a sausage, so when you need to push a sausage forward on the front of your fork, there's this interesting twirl motion that turns out to actually be faster by 2 moves. But it only applies to when you have to fork push a sausage, and you almost never want to do that. You almost always want to push a sausage with your butt, just because invariably you have to roll it afterwards. Oh, and I forgot to split. See. The World 1 time is like a 5:12 or so. I don't remember exactly. It's very fast. But World 1 was not where a lot of things were saved. This level was great. I love this level. Just a couple of cleanups here, including flipping the level left and right, and this level feels so much smoother as you get to end at the right location. This level is super neat. There have been 3 runs. There's a 4th run, but it's like a 4-hour time, and I didn't watch it. There have been 3 good runs of this game that have been done. There's Jellyfish, who has the record. There's Darknote Zero, who has 2nd place. And there's Kalamandu, who has 3rd place, though that run seems to have vanished recently. But I did get to watch it before I got taken down. So this run is, for the most part, me stealing the best strats from everybody. With some exceptions where I made my own strats. But for the most part, this is just adapting either the ILs or the strats in the run. Here's another spot where we have to fork push. And it actually saves a bunch of time with the way I handled the sausages at the beginning. But again, these are, when I say a bunch, I mean like a handful of moves. Most of these levels were not improved by 20 moves. They were improved by like 4. The rule of thumb is that it's 6 moves to a second. A move is like 0.17 seconds or so. And it's pretty close. It's pretty close to 6 in a second. But most levels were just pretty well optimized. But not all the runners, for some reason, copied each other's notes, even though I think Jellyfish's run was first. There's a lot of strats that he's using that aren't in the other runs. Which is good and bad, because it means that there's some people who found other improvements because they didn't just copy the strats blindly, but it also means there's a lot of really slow strats that people are doing. And then there's levels like this one that are just so brutally simple that there's nothing to save. Like, this is the same strat that was used by everyone. There's like a slight optimization to do with exactly how you push the sausage at the end. It's like 2 moves, but it didn't really matter, and it didn't save a second in the end. Twisty Farm. This level is very tricky to get right. There was one improvement here. I don't remember who found this. I'm going to assume it was Calamandu if I don't have it written down, because I don't actually have it. But specifically, you have to use both sausages to get to the end, but there's a slightly faster way of handling the end there that doesn't involve 2 full rotations. At the end of each world, there's this overworld sausage, which we'll understand why they exist later, but for now, just understand that each world is gated. You can't get to the next world until this sausage unlocks. So they're locked in a green box, not a red box. The red boxes start when you start the level. And getting these sausages in place is surprisingly tricky. Most of them are pretty simple. This one in particular is a good illustration of how to do it right, and not of a particular rule about pushing sausages. You can push that sausage with your fork, but it's faster to butt push it, to push it with your back. Just because that is 1 move per... I forgot my splits again. I'm getting too distracted watching my own run. It's just always faster to take 1 move per sausage push. This is another good example of that. You want to cook all 3 sausages at once, because doing so means that you only pay 1 move to cook all the sausages. This one had a really great improvement, and this is mine. When you lower the sausages, it's very important to do so while moving to the right, not to the left. That was like a 12 moves, 13 moves? I think it was 12. Almost all the move savings are even numbers. Just due to the way parity works in this game, because it takes 1 move to rotate and 1 move to step in the direction, it almost always takes the same number of movements, or an even number of movements, to complete a level. Ooh, this level had... No, this level didn't have any serious improvements. This starting strat is a little bit cool, but it's not. It doesn't actually save that many moves. But in general, it's worth it to follow the rule of always... You always want to push 2 sausages at once when you can. So there's something I should call out there. The sausage dropped. There is gravity in this game, and when sausages fall, you aren't allowed to make any inputs, and it does take time. So there isn't that much you can do about it. Most of the solutions to these levels are actually pretty scripted. Like, there are a couple of ways of doing them, but they're mostly going to be stuck in one particular way. This level had a really neat improvement. Hey, 10. Does not have frame rules. This level has like 20 plus moves of improvement, mostly inspired by Calamandu. Specifically, it's to do with this 3rd sausage. Wearing this 3rd sausage as a hat saves a whole bunch of finagling if you try and keep them balanced. Yeah, for the most part, this task is a very mild... The tool assistance is very mild. It's really just getting all the inputs frame perfect. There isn't a lot of... Or there aren't any, as far as I'm aware, glitches that are useful. There are a couple of unuseful glitches. Oh yeah, 10, you did some ILs for this game. You just never did a full game run. So this is another good example of handling all 3 sausages at once. Obviously, that's the point of this level, but there are a couple of solutions where you break apart the sausage stack and then reform it. It's way slower to do that, unsurprisingly. But it's way slower to do that. One of the really important rules is to keep everything in sync. Yeah, so I was talking a little bit about the falling time for sausages. So all of the movements are the same period of time. So stepping forward, rotating, but falling sausages take longer. I did not actually time how long it is, but as I was saying, there isn't a lot to do about it, because the strats for the sausage movement, there are some times when you can avoid doing certain things with the sausages. But the strats for the actual movement of the sausage, usually they drop once. You don't very often bring them upwards. And when they drop, they're going to drop the same distance, because it's the same sort of high ground. Because the only way you can take a sausage upwards is with sort of this very specific 3x3 with a pole on top. You'll see this set up a lot in World 3, the Cold World, and all the further worlds. Because this is the sort of setup that lets you pick up sausages. Right, you see there's one up top here. There's a little 3x3 with a pillar in the middle. And we're not going to be able to pick up a sausage unless there's a sort of exactly that setup, because otherwise we won't be able to put it down again. Let's see. This level's kind of neat. This is sort of one of our first experiences in this task, not necessarily in the game as a whole, with log rolling. Log rolling is a trick where or is a mechanic, where you walk on a sausage. And when you're standing on the sausage, you can still turn left and right, but a step forwards will actually bring you backwards, and a step backwards will actually bring you forwards. The most important part of log rolling is that while you are rolling, you cannot step off the sausage in the direction it's rolling. You can only step off of it to the sides. And for that particular level, you have to carefully manage the 3 sausages at the beginning. Here's another level with log rolling. The whole point of this level is to get the sausages set up in the positions you want them, and then to input the sequence to cook all of them. But you have to be careful, because you can't cook a sausage twice. Then it will burn. This strat, by the way, is verbatim from the ILs, because there is not actually a lot that's complicated in that level. There are other ways to do it, but Cold Terrace had a whole bunch of improvements, starting with this first sausage. It is a lot faster to push these 2 sausages into place and then slide them along to the side. And then this handling with the fork lift, it's a very rare thing to do, but you can hold a sausage on your fork rather than on your head, and then when you turn, it drops. Once again, I'm setting up all 3 sausages before I start cooking them, because it's going to be a lot faster. I don't want to spend time cooking one, then running back to get another, then cooking one, then running back to get another. Some of that level was inspired by Kalamandu, again. We are almost done with World 3. I think there are 2 levels left. This level is not a real level. There is only one solution to it. I mean, it's interesting, but once you have to get the 2 sausages in this form, and then you just cook both of them. This level is interesting because you have to figure out how to get back. Because there's a checkerboard pattern there that you can't walk across. Yeah. Cold Gate. Sausage Tower number 2. So sausages, fortunately, when they're stacked, all move as one unit. And we take huge advantage of that here. We want to spend as much time as possible pushing stacks of sausages. Because anytime we have to push a single sausage, of course, we have to cook the other half of it as well, and then we'll be paying the movement twice. Alright, we are done with World 3. Let me actually hit the split this time. Cool. The World 3 overworld sausage, the overworld sausage here is not super hard to cook. Doesn't do cutscene skips. I didn't see any cutscene skips. Is this something that's not in any of the runs that you figured out? There is an input that we get at the beginning of each cutscene. There's an input at the beginning of each cutscene that we get. This level I really liked. This was a pretty big improvement. To cook each sausage halfway first. You have to pick up the vertical sausage to rotate it no matter what. But and this was also in Jellyfish's run, that you don't have to, you can spear the sausage, and then not unspear it before you cook it. This level was also interesting. Exactly as done is like move or hit restart at the cutscene. It skips it, but you have to skip every cutscene afterward you saw lock. I didn't see that in your run. I'll have to go look again. Yeah. So we start by cooking one sausage because we're not ever going to unstack these 2. But we do get to save a lot of time by not stacking the 3 sausages up top. We get the third sausage off and cook it. Undo mover hit restart at the cutscene. I will have to try that, because if there's an improvement, I would like to take it. This level is verbatim the IL. Nothing new. Oh, I did want to mention there was a slight overworld reroute for this world. All of the different runners had different ideas about the overworld, and I tried to time as many of them as I could, but there was a lot to time, and I did not want to time every possible combination. Oh yeah, and there was... Who was this? I want to say this is Dark Note Zero, who said that found that this is a 2-move improvement. It is very minor, but it's super cool that you can sausage roll. You can log roll back instead of pushing the sausage onto the other grill. Yeah, no, your individual levels were very solid. Though some of the levels, I think you had faster routes in the real run than in the ILs. Frenchy Lee strat. This is from Dark Note Zero, I think, as well. The startup of this level. But the rest of the end of this level is very, very scripted. You have to leave the horizontal sausage there so you can spear both the vertical sausages. There's just nothing else you're allowed to do. There's some slight changes you can make to this final sausage, but nothing super serious. Gator Paddock is another very scripted level. Honestly, the hard part of this level is just figuring out what you need to do. Because there's this very complicated, I guess it's an alligator, I'm not sure, collection of ladders and blocks, and it's not obvious where you're supposed to go. But you know you have to spin the sausage. You just don't know how. Or get it on your head, but you don't know how. But there's really only one way to do it. Ooh, this is another neat improvement. This is from Kalamando. This final sausage we need to get down, and we can only do that by spearing it. Oh no, excuse me, that's not true. We need to rotate it. And this is the only level that's accessible to us that lets us do it. It's the same strat as the level itself, but rather than actually taking off the sausage, we're going to carry it all the way down to the exit point. And this saves us like 4 moves of having to push it into place. I missed my split again. I'm doing a very bad job of dealing with the live splits. Ah, yes, our first fork disconnection. So, when Steven walks off a ledge, and his fork is attached to a sausage, speared in a sausage, then it disconnects. He sort of just drops it, because it's, I guess, stuck on the ledge above him. And then he walks around as this little forkless guy. You still pay the same rotation cost for him, so it's not any faster to move in this form. But it does let you move through spaces you would not otherwise be able to, because you can't turn with your fork sometimes through spaces. This is the World 5 mechanic. Basically every single level is going to use it. And usually the places in which you use it are pretty scripted. Like, there just aren't that many places you can do it. You can also do it that way. If you walk backwards off a ledge, then your fork gets left behind you. So in this particular level, this is that same 3x3 with a peak on top that I talked about earlier. But in this particular case, there's also a ladder on the centerpiece, and you'll see that configuration a lot for fork drops. Skeleton. This is a neat level. This is from Kalamandu. We're gonna have to make a stack of all 3 sausages here. And there's a couple of ways to do it, but this way turns out to be the best. You make a stack of 2, and you set up the 3rd sausage behind the first 2, so that you can push all 3 together. We need to get them all over to this pillar, but that way they're all already in position. And this level, we're gonna keep our sausage on our head as a hat. So in the previous levels, we actually had to be careful a little bit, because we couldn't walk up to our sausage facing the correct direction. Or, excuse me, up to our fork facing the correct direction. And so for this particular level, we don't have to worry about that because there is no direction we can face to pick up our fork again. It's also required to bypass those two hanging, I don't know what they're called, dragons, I guess? Anyway, we're going to cook all the sausages first, and then we're going to get back our fork, and then we're going to leave. So we walk into one of the dragons, it gives us a little push to let our fork back on into our hands, and then we are all set to go to the end. This is one of the longest levels in World 5, if not the longest. This level's like 100-something moves? No, 300-something moves, excuse me. I don't have the numbers on me. Trying to remember why we even need to drop our fork for this level. Oh yeah, it's to get the sausage away from the edge. So there's a sausage up here that's tucked into a 1x1 gap, and so the only way to get to it, of course, is to bring our fork there. I'll note, as I was before, it's always faster to push two sausages at once. So if we can push one sausage down, and that puts us in position to push the other one to the right, that's going to save us a few moves. This level's great. So, somehow, I don't know if this is an oversight or it was intentional, but there is a strat that Jellyfish has, where you don't need to drop your fork at all for this level. You can just move the sausage forward and back, and it's considerably faster than any of the strats that drop their fork. It's great. It's the only level in World 5 that works that way, unfortunately. All the other ones seem to require it. This level is super interesting. So I don't know if you've noticed yet, but all of the levels that all the times we've speared a sausage, we haven't done it lengthwise. There's a very good reason for that, because the way we disconnect our sausage is usually to, like, trap it on a corner. But when we speared lengthwise, there's no friction, as it were, on the sausage to spear. But in this particular level, obviously this is the intended strat that you're supposed to do, the exit is set up right in position with the sausage, so you can get the fork back, even though it's still speared, and then exit the level. This level's amazing. Pressure points, this strat is 100% Dark Not Zero. Rather than the intended route, where you do a disconnect and then push the sausage on the right, you can instead, with some very careful maneuvering of a sausage and a fork, roll your way over and move the sausage away from the edge. This is about 8 moves faster, but it's amazing because it saves you the entire bottom right area. It wastes a bunch of time getting set up, but it's just barely faster, and it's a super cool strat. It's very much this was not intended, but it works. Open Baths, on the other hand, is a very straightforward level. The fork disconnect here is required, as is wearing it as a hat. The only slight adjustment I made here was that it is faster to reconnect with your fork as early as possible. But the rest of the level is completely scripted. It's a neat level, don't get me wrong, but it's very unimaginative, in fact, in terms of the requirements. It really is. Disconnect your fork, put all the sausages into place. I think we've got 2 levels left in World 3. No, maybe it's 3. Drumlin next? Yeah. Drumlin's a very neat level, by comparison. Drumlin has you handling 3 sausages that are all trapped in the corner. And so you know you need to disconnect your fork, but not quite why. And then there's this area up top, for some reason. I guess that's where you're also supposed to put your fork. And you can push your fork into a sausage without actually disconnecting it. And that's how you get one of the sausages out of the corner, because otherwise you don't have the space. And then from there, it's a pretty simple matter of line off all the sausages and cook them. Okay, thank you. And then Terry Ridge. This level's the furthest away, so we do it last. This one has an improvement by Kalamandu. Oh no, there's one more level. Here there's a sausage once again trapped up top, and so we have to disconnect our fork to get up to it. But nothing says that we have to reconnect with our fork. And so we can just sort of set up our fork for where we'll need it later, and then come back, rather than having to do anything funny with manipulation. And then it's just a matter of put the 2 sausages in place, once again pushing them at the same time. Saves a bunch. Yeah, one more level. Rough view. There's such a dumb improvement to this level, and I love it so much. So once again, starting with a fork disconnect, because that's the theme of World 5, and we want to keep disconnected for quite a while. Here, the mechanic is that we're going to push our fork all the way around so that we can get to this sausage over here. And this is just slow and tedious, but it's fine. But you don't have to push the fork down. You actually have the space to spin around up top. And it's such an obvious improvement. There's just a ladder and it takes you up to a block and you can spin around. But it saves, again, like 10 moves. And it's just great. And there's another level? This world is so long. So here, the idea is that the two sausages are in the wrong place. And the only way to get them across requires us to have a disconnected fork. And we want to bring our fork with us, so we leave it speared in one of the sausages. But the thing that you have to be careful of in this level is that your fork continues rolling as you roll the sausage. And so you have to make sure that it's set up the right direction so that when you roll into it on the other side, it goes the right way. Oh, thank God. So we're entering World 6, tentatively named. I know there are 2 more splits after this, but all of the levels from here on out seem to be part of the same general idea, which is that there's a green sausage, which previously we've only seen ending the world, and that green sausage is required before you start the level. So in this case, that green sausage helped keep this platform from not sinking. One of the sausages was in its mouth, as it were, before we started the level, and that prevented it from sinking. As you can sort of see, when we start each level, everything that's not this level sinks into the sea, and then rises up again when we're done with it. Yeah, another green sausage. So here, I think these are called dragons, just on the side of the level, and if there isn't a sausage under it, it'll fall. The rules for how support works are a little bit complicated. There's actually a really neat level later that's going to play off of this specifically, the idea of whether or not something is supported. And I'll try and explain a little bit of how it works when we get there. Here's a level, they give us 3 sausages and 3 platforms, and that's because this level is very long to set up. We have each of these 3 platforms. Oh yeah, this is the level. Yeah, I don't have notes on it. This is the level. This has some very interesting mechanics to do with supportability. The basic gist is when you are supporting an object with a sausage, there can be 2 supports. You can have 2 sausages supporting it. And if there are 2 supports, then when you push the other sausage, it's still considered supported and that sausage will roll. But it depends where you're standing. If you're standing on the platform itself, it'll move the sausage relative to the island. And if you're standing on the island, it'll move relative to the platform, I believe is the rule. It comes into play right there when I push these 2 sausages up. I have to be standing on the platforms to do it. Otherwise, it will roll the island instead. It'll roll relative to the platform, or relative to the island. It'll actually push the platforms. Not strictly required. There are other ways of handling this level, but if you want to do it quickly, that is a requirement. And I'm going to leave something that I think none of the runners found. I'm actually going to leave a 1-tile gap here with this platform. It can be 1 tile further down, but you don't need it to be. And if it's here, you have a clean walking path to the exit. You don't have to go around the bottom. The level is set up in particular so that you can't really soft lock. That won't be true later. But for this level, they wanted to make sure it didn't matter what configuration you ended with the platforms in. Because when you end and everything rises back up again, the platforms stay where they are. Once again, we're keeping the 2 objects for this level risen before we start it. This is the decay. I'm sure there's some plot reason why it has that name. There's a plot to this game. I don't remember it. There are these little plaques, and you can stand next to them, and they give you text. I don't know. It's a puzzle game. What do you want? The mechanic here is that this platform, this wooden platform, has 2 elevations, and we need both of them in a particular order. Oh, there was a slight move loss I took here to push this stone piece to the left rather than juggling it through the rest of the level. When I mentioned that things take time to drop, if we keep juggling it through the rest of the level, it'll drop 3 times, and the time loss from that is more than the extra 2 moves to push it out of the way. I think it's the only intentional move loss in this run. So here we have the same idea of platforms that are supported, which we can move on, but now we have also these pillars on the mainland. And so rather than just pushing sausages to move the platforms, we can push the platform by rotating against one of the pillars. We're going to get a lot more of this mechanic because they like it. I think we're right below the starting island right now, actually. Yeah, I think that was the starting island up there. I don't remember the coordinate system exactly. This level is super cool. Captive Hydra is a very challenging level to play casually because you have these 2 heads, and you have to keep this platform supported at all times while you cook one sausage and then the other. There's an amazing strat there. I don't know if you caught it from Kalamandu, where we rotate up while keeping the Hydra's head on our sausage fork, rather than on our head or on a sausage, and that means that it disconnects and then reconnects to the vertical sausage. And it saves us a whole bunch of movement time dealing with shifting the Hydra around. In the standard strat, the conventional strat, you actually have to move the Hydra back and forth between the 2 sausages to keep it balanced. Rattlesnakes is super cool. So, yeah, there's two sausages. I can't even explain it before this level's done. There's 2 platforms there with the 4 grills, and you can't touch the sausage directly. You can only push the rattlesnakes. But played correctly, that level is, I think, the shortest in the entire game, including the levels in the tutorial world. It's just so quick. So in Sty, we're introduced to another very odd mechanic. There's an exit that's actually on one of the sausages. It's burned now, so it's cooked now, so it's a little bit harder to see, but it's very much not a fixed location, and so you have to make sure that when you cook the second sausage, which you have to do by log rolling, that you're in a position to get to the exit. And then it just drops you down if you're standing on the sausage. This level. This is another Kalamandu strat, I think. Split face? Yeah. So, obviously the way this level is set up, it's supposed to be symmetrical. But you can actually put one of the sausages into this level horizontally, and it works fine. The game's obviously not going to prevent you from doing that. And it's not super obvious why this is advantageous, or it wasn't to me. What this lets you do is cook this sausage without any additional work. Usually, to cook the second sausage, the bottom sausage, you have to do the same sort of shuffling that I did with the top sausage. But when it's horizontal, it can just be rolled into the grill and cooked. Super quick. Super good strat. Alright, this is Four-Faced Liar. I found some small improvements here in the top right quadrant. So the idea here is we have this 4-directional thing, and we sort of have to roll it here and then back. Jellyfish found, and I think none of the other runners copied, you don't need to get the 2 sausages perfectly perpendicular, or perfectly at opposite corners to get your way back. You just need them to be one of them vertical, one of them horizontal. Top and bottom works, because you don't care about this sausage that we've left on the platforms. Anyway, there's some slight jiggering in the top right corner as to how you set it up. Now we have... I thought I knew. Suspension bridge? Yeah. The setup for this level is super tight. It's very hard to get these sausages in place quickly, and not have to spend a lot of time fidgeting with them. The start of the level also has a really cool improvement, or I think it's cool, because I found it, where you shift and then shift back. Again, this is taking advantage of those static pillars that you can use to push the platforms while you're on them. Otherwise, you can't interact with them. The whole challenge for this level is that you can only cook one sausage at a time because you need to keep the bridges up to make your way back. So one of the important things about this run in general is making sure that you're correctly... Oh yeah, here's that weird thing about where you're standing. We have to be standing on the left-hand bridge to make sure that it doesn't move the left-hand platform, because the pushes are relative to where we are standing. One of the important things about this run that's been happening throughout is to do with how we cook sets of sausages when there's a double grill like this. They very often give us just a 2x2 grill in these later levels and say, you have to get all the sausages over to this grill somehow. And there's a couple of ways of doing it, but the fastest one is to fork push, to push with the front of your fork all the way down the sausage. I think there was a slight improvement to the start of this level, just to do with the third sausage here that I'm setting up. And I found it very slight. I worked really hard on this cooking pattern. We have 3 sausages. We have to cook them on the grill. And once again, we want to try and move all of them at once. The more we can do that, the more time we save. But if we spend a lot of time maneuvering them into position to do that, it costs us. Your route was very good. You had one of the fastest cooking patterns. I think you had all 3 sausages cooked on move 215, and I got down to 211. So I don't know if you noticed there, but the 2 dragons here popped their heads back up at the end of the level. When you finish a level, all of the static objects in the world return to their original height, but not their original XY. Ancient Dam is, again, a pretty scripted level. You have to get both sausages up here, and you have to cook them in this particular way. But the trick is all about how you move this Ancient Dam, how you shuffle it side to side. So there's a moment here where we have to swap the 2 sausages, and this just turns out to be not that hard if you're really careful about it. The strat that I found that I'm really happy about is that you don't have to bring the 3rd sausage all the way out to disconnect it. You can disconnect it on the dam itself. Saved 12 instructions, I think. 10 or 12. There was another improvement on this level, but I don't remember what it was. It's a super cute little level, because it's very much a distinctive piece of geometry. There aren't a lot of other levels that have these sort of weird, flat objects. Apex. So Apex introduces a new mechanic that we're not going to see in every level, but it's a movable block. So whereas before we've always been working with sort of large objects, we're now being handed this 1x1 tile. So it's very easy to manipulate around, but it's also very hard to keep it where you want it. And so we have to do a bunch of pushing here to get it exactly where we need it, and then we're going to have to use it as a ladder at the very end of this level. There were a bunch of improvements throughout this level that I made, just to do with handling of the block and the sausage. For this final segment, we need it on our head so that we can drop it in front of us while we set up this sausage. But yeah, the entirety of this is great because it's a ladder as well. And so we get to use it as our block to beat the level. And once again, it returns to its original... I guess it doesn't return to its original elevation. It's only the 2 blocks up top that do that. We're going to have a couple of levels in a row here with this mechanic, I think. Oh, no. Excuse me. We go right back immediately to Splitting Tree? Stone Tree. Stone Tree. This has improvements from both Kalamandu for the start, with this very nice handling of this sausage right now, where we leave it set up on the end so that it can catch us when we drop the platform. And then the cooking had an improvement from Dark Knot Zero to do with 1 fewer trip, where we can cook 3 sides of this sausage by pushing it out. And then when we swap it with the second sausage, it'll be fully cooked. And then the second sausage gets cooked on the far grill. Saves us sort of 1 additional roundabout trip with swapping the sausages. Ah, yeah, it is this level next. Backbone. Yeah, this is a level, I'm honestly embarrassed how long it took to find this improvement. I had to watch Calamandu's run to find it. So, this is a really neat level start. You can see there's one of these blue blocks again that's going to move independently. Um, and so we're going to start off the level by getting it down from its little precarious perch and then dropping the platform that it's on. And we're going to use this sort of to shift back and forth with these neat little rotations. And the strat improvement that I, again, feel kind of dumb for not thinking of is that you just want to cook all 3 sausages at once. Again, I've been talking about it all run. I just hadn't occurred to me. If we cook all 3 at once, this grill is really awkwardly placed. It's really up on the edge, and we don't have a good way of scavenging sausages once they are pushed past the edge. And so if we cook all 3 of them at once, we save ourselves a lot of awkwardness of having to manipulate the sausages. We're reaching somewhat near the end of the run. I think there's still like 5 or 6 more levels, but all of these final levels are really difficult, and so there were improvements that I made on, I think, all of them, which I honestly chalk up to the fact that I was able to play these levels with, you know, rewinds and frame advance. Baby Swan, this is my improvement. For the starting handling, you don't need to be as careful with the swan. You can keep it on the sausage while you do the initial handling. And then there's some slight improvements at that next part where we're going to handle moving the swan down while still speared so that we don't have to pay as much for rotation. But the end of the level is basically forced. You have to set up a sausage, push the swan onto it, so it doesn't drop into the water or drop too far down that you can't walk across it. And once again here we have to be on the swan when we do our swap, but we can do the swap in a slightly fancy way by pushing the swan down rather than the sausage up. Yeah, it's not that much faster. It just looks super cool. Let's see. This is, what level is this? I don't have the names written down. The start for this level is slightly different. This is Shy Dragon. We're starting this level 1 further down, with the sausages on the bottom of the 3 squares rather than on the top. It just winds up being a little bit faster at the startup. And then there's a small improvement here. We still have to cook this first sausage in the super slow way, but the other 2 sausages we can actually cook just leaving them on the grills. We don't have to swap them back out. And that saves over 20 moves of just not having to manipulate the sausages. This is Lover's Sadness, I think. Yeah. The start's pretty forced, though there's some neat tricks you can do with which order you set up these sausages in, just so you don't have to walk back around. The improvements here are from a number of sources, but the main improvement at the end is from Calamandu. The startup here is really tight. You've got not a lot of space to work with. You have to set up, again, you have to double support this this bridge and then swap the support. And if you do it in a very precise spot, it doesn't cost you a bunch of moves. The improvement here is this part coming up, where rather than getting all the way back with this sausage, we're just going to leave it here. And then we're going to abandon this bridge early. And now we don't have to pay a bunch of cost of shuffling it around. This is one of the levels where we don't care about the ending position of the support objects because we aren't coming back through. I don't think there were any improvements on this level. Dragon Claw. Yeah. Again, the mechanic here is that we can't walk across because there's this checkerboard pattern, so we have to log roll across. And then cook the sausages and then log roll back. And there's just only so much space here, and so there's only so many ways to do it. There's a little bit of careful handling of the platform, but there's only so much you can do, and there's a bunch of really awkward shuffling that I tried very hard to get rid of, but could not find a way to do it. Yeah. There's this weird little interlude here where they set up a pair of ladders just so that you can't turn around. I don't know why they did it, but anyway, you have to walk all the way around there. It's just obnoxious. Obscene Gesture is also pretty scripted, but there's a little bit of improvement to be made at the end here to do with how you cook the sausages. Just once again, trying to not pay too much of a cost while shuffling them around. And we need to keep the platform, I think. No, we don't care about the platform position again. Let's see. The nursery. This is a super cool level. I optimize this level a lot. Specifically, the cooking at the end is kind of hard. The main improvement to this level is from Skigot, someone who has only done Siget? I don't know. Someone who's only done ILs. And in fact, I think it's only this IL. And it's specifically that when you set up the two dragons, the whole point of this level is to get to that sausage in the top left and push it. And to do that, we need the two dragons stacked on each other. And to do that, we don't need to do anything fancy. We can actually support them both on this little pillar and push them into place. It's very tight, but it is way faster than bringing them both onto the mainland. Then the cooking at the end is all me optimizing. I think that level is 200 moves flat. 200 was sort of the general goal I had for level times. Canal has a pretty major improvement at the start here by Dark Knot Zero to do with how we're going to handle the initial two, the initial problem, which is how do we swap these two objects. And you don't have to push them quite as into position as I was expecting, because if you leave them here, you can double support it. You can put a sausage in such a position that when you drop the top platform, you can slide it into place onto the sausage, and then it becomes supported. The main issue with this level is that you had to shuffle up and down to get both the sausages into position. Like you have to go adjust the top sausage, and then the middle sausage, and the top sausage again. And if you can set it up so that you can get it lined up without having to do that, it saves a whole bunch of effort. And then there's some optimizations at the end about, again, how you cook the sausages exactly, which I think I stole from Jellyfish again. In case I haven't mentioned it, almost all these strats, when I say is an improvement, I'm talking about Jellyfish's run, because all of the ILs in Jellyfish's run are really optimized. All the individual levels are really optimized. There's a couple that are not super perfect that are improved in the individual level runs themselves, but for the most part, I'm just stealing those and removing the mistakes. But occasionally there's improvements from other runners, like this level, that I had not thought of, that you can just push the sausage up. And yeah, it gets a little bit cooked, but it's how you're going to start the cooking process anyways, so it doesn't cost you anything, and it saves you a bunch of movement. This level is super awkward because of this double grill. You have no space to work with. You just have to do this very particular pattern of pushes and rotates to cook every side one at a time. Usually you want to try and set up the sausage so that it's lined up with the grill, so that you're cooking both sides at once, like this, because that'll save you a whole bunch of time having to shuffle it around. But it's not always possible. Sometimes when you set up like that, you're going to run out of space. Like you won't be able to pick up the sausage again once you're done. We're nearing the end, but these levels keep getting longer and longer, and the grand finale is, of course, obscenely long. Every other level sort of pales in comparison to it. Loft of the Spirit here is a very neat level. We have one of these platforms, and as opposed to a lot of the other levels, we're going to be using this platform pretty actively throughout the puzzle. So we get it set up here so that it's resting on the top ledge, and it's always going to have a sausage in its maw. The start here with this initial cook, this improvement is from Dark Knot Zero. Just specifically having to keep the platform up top saves you a bunch of headache. Pushing it all the way down to the bottom is very slow. And the ending is from Jellyfish. You only actually have to cook one sausage there because you don't care about keeping the second sausage on the platform. You can push it off towards the edge once you're done. Yeah, we're definitely getting into the weird levels now. This level is super cool, Wobble Cliff, because you sort of build the puzzle as you go. Like, they give you this flat platform and a whole bunch of puzzle pieces, and you slide them into place where it makes sense to do so. And you just have to make sure they don't fall off the ledge. It's super fun to play. The IL, of course, is super optimized, and so it's not that much to look at, but it's a really neat level. And we now have 2 levels left. The setup here is kind of cool. This is something I found, just slightly better handling of these sausages. And this is one of the few levels where we do have to be careful about how we finish the level. We've got these 2 platforms. There's like a dragon and a wooden platform. And they're going to restore to this height, the original height, when we're done. And in the IL, what we could do is we could just leave them wherever they needed to be, wherever was fastest. But because this is a full game run, we need to make sure we can get up to the grill platform at the end. We're going to be going there to move on to the next level. And so we have to make sure we leave the wooden platform in particular in a position that is usable. It doesn't have to be usable vertically, because it'll restore itself to its original vertical height, but it needs to be up top. Alright, so in case you haven't noticed, the number of sausages has been slowly trending up, and now we have 8, which is the most we've ever been asked to do in one puzzle. This is God Pillar. This is the hardest level in the game. The thing I'm most proud of here is the startup, actually. Setting up all these sausages into these little huts, or whatever they are, was really tricky to find a good way to do it, and I'm very happy with this one. The key here is just minimizing movement. We're going to be taking only 1 trip up and down, and that saves a whole bunch of time. The actual puzzle itself, I think there's probably more ways to handle this puzzle than any other puzzle in the game. It's a very open-ended puzzle. The goal here is to make a stack of all of these little houses. I'm going to do it using the route that Jellyfish is doing, which is 1 at a time. We're going to set up a pair of these, and we're going to stack them. And then we're just going to deal with the entire left side and then the entire right side. I want to call out Kalamandu found a nice improvement for actually making the stacks, where instead of doing sort of a double cycle, where you would walk down the side of the platform and then back up to stack the platforms, you instead step forwards again and rotate. And you'll also note that while I'm going, I'm pushing every single one of the sausages that was holding up the platforms back in towards the center. I need to push the platforms in, of course, but by pushing the sausages in as well, I'm setting up for the end of the level. A lot of this stuff is sort of not RTA safe, because the movements here are really precise. In particular, some of them are being done blind. You can't see Steven at all. But the ending is definitely something that could be done RTA. There's a particular way that we're going to stack these sausages into a row. Again, we want to cook all the sausages at once. That's going to always be faster. So we make a large pile of them. We have to be a little bit careful. There's 1 too many sausages. And so we have to bring one of them out of the pile before we cook them all, so it doesn't fall off the edge at the bottom. Oh, excuse me. I guess there was actually 9 sausages in that level. Okay, that is our last puzzle solved. Yeah, good enough to stop doing ILs? Absolutely. This level is brutal. That was our last puzzle solved, but now something interesting has happened, which is that all the grills are going to turn on. And it may take you a little while to figure out what the hell is going on your first time through this run. But what we're now being asked to do is to cook all the sausages that are in the overworld that we've been playing with. Starting with this one. The sun is just now setting in the game. And we're just going to make a very long trek all the way back. This is, without a doubt, the longest puzzle in the game. This puzzle is over 1,000 moves. puzzle, if I can even call it that. We've been taking a little bit of care when we set up our sausages in the overworld to make sure that they were easy to cook. There's not a lot we can do about that because the positions they have to be in are pretty scripted. That said, the game did, and I'm very grateful for this, make it impossible to soft lock here. You cannot ever leave one of your sausages in such a way that you could not cook it. Such that you could get to the next world but could not cook it. Which is very kind of them, because you wouldn't want to undo all the way to World 3 to fix their sausage placement after the end of the level. The only real accommodation we have to do for the sausages is the final level, God Pillar. We actually end with the pillar shifted left to, which makes the final sausage cook a little bit easier. But yeah, this is just a super long trek through the end of the level. So if folks have any questions about the tasks, I can answer them. Or we can just watch Steven butt walk his way all the way to victory. I think there's room for improvement. There's a couple of levels that are definitely improvable. God Pillar is definitely among them. Honestly, most of World 6 I don't feel super confident in. Dragons, what did I use to task this? I wrote my own program. Yeah, a lot of World 6 is improvable. Just because I don't have a lot of ILs to go off of, and all of the runners who weren't exactly you Jellyfish, did really bad strats. And so I just don't have a lot to work with there. Also, anytime I find a lot of improvements, and I found a lot of improvements in World 6, I feel suspicious. Like, I found 4 improvements in World 1 by the time I was done. They were very small. Like, there was just not a lot to improve. Whereas World 2, I found a couple of levels that had major improvements. And then by the time we get to World 6, it's like I'm rerouting things. And it feels like there were probably other strats to find. Yeah, I wrote my own code for this. I've since worked with the person who writes libtasks, and it looks like I'll be able to make an official task of this. But even with that, I think I still am going to use my own tool. Basically what it did is it broke down each level. So I could go to a level in the task inputs and like reset in game, and then I play back the inputs from there. I have like a go forwards 1 input, go backwards 1 input. And what the program is doing is it's just hooking into the function in this game that says, tell me what the next player input was. And it just overwrites that. This is a subtle improvement. This grill is faster to cook on. One of the few improvements I found. Alright, there we go. Not much of this is task-like execution. Yeah, especially if there's a notable improvement. There's really nothing hard. The only thing that I would mention that's a bit tricky is walking backwards is not always the most comfortable. And I'm doing a lot of that because it saves a lot of time. But the memorization would be scary. I guess, but I mean, I saved 10 seconds over your World 1, and your World 1 was almost flawless, or it looked almost flawless. Sorry, 10 seconds in the just running with your route before I even applied improvements. So there's definitely a lot of time that's being saved by just better than human inputs. I'm not